hit me like a warhammer to the chest the moment I crossed the threshold into the throne room. One second I was walking normally, escorted by royal guards who'd found me half frozen in the mountain pass just 3 days after the worst moment of my life. The next liquid fire raced through my veins and pooled low in my belly, then lower still until I felt wetness gathering between my thighs in a way that had never happened before. My legs buckled. I grabbed the nearest stone pillar to stay upright, gasping as moisture soaked through my undergarments in seconds. The sensation was overwhelming heat and need and desperate hunger, all crashing over me in waves I had no power to resist. Every wolf in that massive hall could smell it, could sense my arousal flooding the ancient chamber like a physical presence. I heard the sharp intake of breath from the assembled nobles, saw their heads turn toward me, nostrils flaring, expressions shifting from curiosity to shock to something darker. And seated on the obsidian throne at the far end of the hall, watching me with eyes that burned like molten gold, was the Alpha King himself, his gaze locked onto mine, and the heat intensified tenfold. More wetness flooded my core. My inner muscles clenched around nothing aching to be filled, and a whimper escaped my throat before I could stop it. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Not to me. I was Saren Ashmore, the broken Omega whose wolf had never emerged. The rejected betrothed who'd been cast out into the winter wilderness to die. I didn't go into heat. I'd been told I would never experience this. My absent wolf made such things impossible. But there was nothing absent about what was happening to my body now. This was heat in its most primal, devastating form, every nerve ending on fire. Every instinct screaming for an alpha's knot, for rough hands and claiming teeth, for the feeling of being mounted and bred until I couldn't remember my own name. I'd never wanted anything so badly in my entire life. And the Alpha King was still watching me with those burning gold eyes, and somehow I knew with absolute certainty that he could smell every drop my body was producing, could sense the desperation radiating from me in waves. The humiliation should have killed me. 22 years of careful control, of learning to make myself small and invisible and inoffensive, all destroyed in the span of a few heartbeats. Collapsing in front of the entire royal court, unable to control my own treacherous body. But shame wasn't what I felt as the Alpha King rose from his throne. What I felt was recognition. My wolf, silent for 6 years dormant, since my 16th birthday, when she should have emerged, suddenly stirred deep in my chest. Not just stirred, roared to life with a clarity and strength that stole my breath. Mate, she whispered, the first word she'd ever spoken to me. Ours, Alpha, breed, no, that wasn't possible. I was nobody. Less than nobody? 3 days ago, I'd been kneeling in the snow outside Ironwood Hold while my betrothed rejected me in front of 200 witnesses. I could still hear Lord Corwin of House Bracken's voice, cold and formal and utterly without mercy. I, Corwin of House Bracken, do hereby reject thee, Saren of House Ashmore, as my betrothed and intended mate. The ancient words had carried across the frozen courtyard. I'd kept my eyes lowered as I'd been taught. A proper Omega accepted rejection with grace and silence, never challenging the Alpha's decision, never making a scene. My mother had drilled that into me from the moment my wolf failed to emerge. 5 years had passed since then, and still she remained dormant, silent, absent. In a world where the ability to shift determined one's value, I was less than nothing. Thou art weak of wolf and thin of blood. Corwin had continued, each word a knife to the chest. And I shall not bind myself to such weakness. The assembled nobles had murmured their agreement. Of course they had. What use was an Omega who couldn't shift, who couldn't breed strong pups, who brought no strength to a noble house? I'd spoken my part of the ritual through a throat tight with unshed tears. I accept thy rejection, Lord Corwin. I release thee from all bonds and obligations between our houses. It was done. The betrothal contract that had existed since my birth dissolved. And I was now what they called a broken Omega one, whose wolf never emerged, whose bloodline ended with her, whose only value had been as a political alliance between two minor houses. Even that small worth was gone now. Pack law said I had 3 days to leave Ironwood territory. After that, I would be considered a rogue and could be killed on sight by any wolf who found me trespassing. 3 days to gather my few belongings, 3 days to say goodbye to my mother, who pressed a worn leather purse into my hands with trembling fingers and couldn't meet my eyes. 3 days before I walked out into the wilderness alone. I'd looked in the purse later once I was far enough from Ironwood Hold that no one could see me cry. $47, all our family savings. Everything my mother had been able to scrape together from years of taking in mending and working in the keep's kitchens. It wouldn't be enough, I knew that. $47 wouldn't buy passage to the neutral territories, wouldn't buy food and shelter for the weeks it would take to walk there through mountain passes still clogged with winter snow. but it was all I had. So I tucked the purse into my bag, alongside one spare dress, my grandmother's silver locket, and a water-stained book of herb lore I'd stolen from the Keep's library years ago. Then I'd started walking north. The Frostpine Pass cut through the Rocky Mountains, a treacherous road even in summer. In winter, it was suicide. But it was also the fastest path to the neutral territories, and I had no time to waste on safer roads. 3 days wasn't enough to reach safety by any route, but at least this way I might get far enough from Ironwood that Corwin's wolves wouldn't bother tracking me. Let the mountains kill me instead. At least that death would be clean. I'd been traveling for 2 days, rationing my food, sleeping in shallow caves when the blizzard hit. One moment the sky was merely gray and threatening, heavy clouds hanging low over the peaks. The next I was being pelted by ice and snow so thick I could barely see my hands in front of my face. The temperature plummeted. Had to be -15. Fahrenheit, maybe colder. Wind screamed through the pass at 60 miles per hour, driving ice crystals into my exposed skin like tiny knives. Visibility dropped to 3 feet, then 2, then nothing but swirling white chaos. I stumbled forward because stopping meant dying, pulled my thin cloak tighter, and tried to find shelter. But the blizzard had transformed the landscape into an alien world, where every rock looked the same, where the path disappeared beneath mounting drifts, where even the direction of the wind kept changing until I couldn't tell north from south. I walked for hours, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in the whiteout. My hands went numb first, then my feet, then my face, until I couldn't feel the ice cutting into my cheeks anymore. Couldn't feel much of anything except the cold seeping deeper and deeper into my bones. When my legs finally gave out and I collapsed into a snowdrift, I thought, this is how it ends. Rejected by my betrothed, abandoned by my pack, frozen to death in the mountains like refuse thrown from the keep. At least it would be quick. They said freezing to death was painless once the cold got deep enough. You just fell asleep and didn't wake up. I closed my eyes, let the snow pile up around me, felt my heartbeat slowing, my breathing getting shallower. This is how it ends, I thought again. And maybe that was fine. Maybe I'd been meant to die here all along. Maybe the goddess who'd never bothered to give me a wolf had always planned for me to end like this, alone and unmourned in the frozen wilderness. But death didn't come. Instead, I felt warm hands pulling me from the snow. Felt myself being lifted, wrapped in furs that smelled of pine and wood smoke. Heard voices speaking urgently, though I couldn't make out the words through the roaring in my ears. Someone was carrying me, running. The movement jostled me, and I wanted to tell them to stop, to just let me sleep, but my tongue wouldn't work. My whole body had gone numb. Then there was warmth, blessed, overwhelming warmth. A fire crackling somewhere close. More furs piled on top of me. Gentle hands checking my pulse, my breathing. A woman's voice, elderly and kind. She's alive, barely but alive. Fetch more blankets and tell His Majesty we found her. His Majesty. The words filtered through the fog in my brain, but made no sense. Why would a king care about a dying Omega in the snow? I tried to ask, but unconsciousness dragged me under before I could form the words. When I woke, I was in a bed softer than anything I'd ever felt in my life. Heavy furs covered me. A fire crackled in a stone hearth large enough to stand in. And sitting beside the bed, watching me with sharp gray eyes, was an elderly woman in healer's robes. She smiled when she saw my eyes open. Genuine relief crossed her weathered face. Praise the goddess, child. Thou art awake. We feared thee lost to the frost. My throat was raw. It took 3 tries to make my voice work. Where am I? Thou art in Shadow Peak Citadel, my lady. She poured water from a clay pitcher and held the cup to my lips. The royal guard found thee near dead in Frostpine Pass and brought thee here on His Majesty's orders. The king himself commanded that no effort be spared in thy care. I choked on the water. Royal Citadel, the capital, the seat of power for the entire Northern Territories, home of the Alpha King who ruled from the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific Coast, from the Canadian border, down through Wyoming and Montana and Idaho. I was in the King's Palace. But why? Why would the most powerful Alpha in the known world care about a broken Omega found freezing in a mountain pass? Surely he had more important concerns than one dying wolf among thousands. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would His Majesty command such care for a stranger? The healer, she'd introduced herself as Vesper, gave me an odd look. Something between pity and excitement flickered in her gray eyes. His Majesty did not say, my lady. But he has been most insistent about thy recovery. He has visited thy chamber thrice daily to check on thy condition and left orders that he be notified the moment thou wakest. A king visiting a common wolf's sickbed? That made no sense at all, unless he wanted something from me. Some service I could provide. But what could a broken Omega possibly offer an Alpha King? Before I could voice the question, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Vesper hurried to answer it and returned looking flustered, her weathered cheeks flushed. His Majesty requests thy presence in the great hall, my lady, as soon as thou art able to walk. He says there are matters that must be discussed without delay. My heart hammered against my ribs. Whatever the king wanted from me, I was about to find out. Vesper helped me dress in borrowed clothing, a gown of deep teal silk far too fine for someone of my station. The fabric felt wrong against my skin, too soft, too expensive. I was used to rough homespun and mended wool, not silk that whispered and flowed like water. She tried to tame my hair, which had been hacked short years ago when I'd sold it for coin during a particularly harsh winter. It stuck up in uneven tufts no matter how much she fussed with it. Thou art beautiful, child, Vesper said softly, meeting my eyes in the mirror. Do not let anyone tell thee otherwise. Beautiful, me. With my too thin frame and crooked nose, broken by my mother's backhand when I was 12. With my scarred hands and bitten nails and hair like a ragged bird's nest. But I didn't argue. Just let her lead me out into corridors of black marble, veined with silver so vast and grand, I felt like a mouse scurrying through a palace built for giants. The throne room doors were 20 feet tall, carved from ancient oak and reinforced with bands of iron. They swung open as I approached, and for a moment all I could do was stare. The chamber was massive, could have held 500 wolves easily. Pillars of black marble rose toward a vaulted ceiling, lost in shadow. Hundreds of candles in iron sconces cast dancing light across stone floors, polished to a mirror shine. And there at the far end of the hall, seated on a throne, carved from a single piece of obsidian so dark it seemed to drink the light, was the Alpha King. I'd never seen him before. Common wolves didn't get audiences with royalty. The king rarely left his citadel for anything less than war or matters of the highest state importance. But I would have known what he was even without the throne, even without the crown of twisted silver sitting on his brow, even without the assembled nobles flanking him on either side like a murder of crows in their dark formal wear. The power radiating from him was like standing too close to a bonfire, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. It pressed against my Omega nature with such force I had to fight the urge to drop to my knees and bare my throat in submission. He was perhaps 32 in appearance, though the stories said he'd ruled for more than 2 centuries. His hair was black as a raven's wing and fell past his shoulders in thick waves. His face was all sharp angles and harsh planes, high cheekbones, strong jaw, a mouth that would have been cruel if not for the intelligence burning in his golden eyes. Golden, not brown or amber or hazel. Pure molten gold, bright as coins, inhuman and beautiful and terrifying. He wore black leather and steel even here in his own hall. A warrior king, his broad shoulders strained against the fitted leather. His hands resting on the arms of the throne were scarred and calloused hands that had held a sword, not just signed decrees. Those golden eyes tracked my approach, studied me with an intensity that made my breath catch, made something low in my belly clench tight. I made it perhaps 10 steps into the throne room. Then my body betrayed me completely. Liquid heat flooded through my veins, my core clenched with sudden desperate need. And between my thighs I felt slickness begin to flow. Not the slow gathering from before, but a rush of wetness that soaked through silk in seconds. My knees buckled. I grabbed the nearest pillar to keep from collapsing completely, fingers scrabbling against smooth marble, as a wave of need so intense it bordered on pain crashed over me. The scent hit the room like a physical wave. I heard shocked gasps, saw nobles turning toward me with wide eyes. Watched nostrils flare as every wolf in the hall caught the unmistakable smell of Omega in heat. My arousal dripped onto the polished stone floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Drip, 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 like a countdown to my complete humiliation. "Oh, goddess," I whispered, mortification flooding through me, even as my body continued its betrayal. "Oh, goddess, I'm so sorry. I can't, this is never—" Silence. The word came from the throne, spoken quietly but carrying such absolute authority that every voice in the hall cut off mid-syllable. Even my own stammering apology died on my lips. The Alpha King rose from his seat. I watched through heat-hazed vision as he descended the steps from the dais. Each movement was fluid grace and controlled power, a predator moving toward prey, and every step he took in my direction made the heat worse. By the time he reached me, I was trembling violently, my body producing so much wetness it was running down my thighs. I could smell myself and knew everyone else could too. I should have been dying of shame, collapsing before the entire royal court, unable to control my own body. But all I could focus on was him, the way he moved, the way he looked at me with those burning gold eyes. the way his nostrils flared as he scented my arousal, and something dark and possessive flashed across his face. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Could smell pine and snow and something wild and ancient that made my wolf surge up from wherever she'd been hiding all these years. Mate, she growled. Ours. Claim. Breed. Ours. What is thy name, Omega? His voice was a deep rumble I felt in my bones, in my chest, lower in places I'd never felt anything before. Seren, I managed through chattering teeth. Seren of House Ashmore. Though I have no house now, no pack. No, I trailed off as he moved closer. Near enough that if I swayed forward even slightly, we would be touching. Near enough that his scent wrapped around me like a physical thing, making my core clench and more wetness flood out. Seren. The way he said my name sounded like a claim, like a promise, like the beginning of something inevitable and terrifying and absolutely right. Dost thou know why thy heat has come upon thee now? Why thy wolf stirs when it has been silent all thy life? I shook my head mutely, didn't trust my voice, didn't trust anything except the need clawing at my insides and the golden eyes holding mine. Because the mate bond has formed, he said, and I felt the words like a brand against my soul. Thou art my true mate, Seren of House Ashmore, the one the goddess created specifically for me. And thy wolf has been waiting dormant until the moment we met to emerge and claim what is ours. The throne room erupted. Shocked voices rose in a wave of sound, nobles arguing, questioning, protesting. I heard fragments through the roaring in my ears. Impossible. No pack, no lineage. Broken Omega cannot be. But I barely registered the words. All I could focus on was the truth blazing in his golden eyes, the certainty in his voice, and the answering call rising from deep in my chest where my wolf had finally woken. Mate, she said again, louder this time. Ours, Alpha, home. No. I breathed even as my body leaned into his touch when he reached up to cut my face. This can't be real. I'm broken. I'm worthless. My betrothed rejected me 3 days ago because I'm weak and thy betrothed was a fool. The words came out sharp, cold, edged with steel that made several nobles flinch. And he will answer to me for his insult to my mate. But first, his thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I whimpered at the contact. We must attend to thy heat before it consumes thee entirely. He turned to address the assembled court without releasing my face. Clear the hall. All of ye, out, now. But your majesty? One of the nobles stepped forward, face florid with outrage. The council meeting the petitions from the southern territories, surely this can wait until... I said clear the hall. This time his alpha power rolled through the room like thunder. It pressed down on every wolf present with crushing force. Several nobles actually stumbled. The one who'd spoken went white and dropped to his knees. Out! Every wolf save my mate, now! They fled. Some of them practically ran scrambling for the doors in their haste to escape the king's displeasure. Guards followed more slowly, faces carefully blank, closing the massive oak doors behind them, with a boom that echoed through the suddenly empty hall. And then I was alone with the Alpha King, alone in a throne room built for hundreds, alone with the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories, while my body continued its desperate need and my wolf howled for his claim. Please, I whispered, I don't understand any of this. How can I be thy mate? I'm nobody. I have no wolf. Thou hast a wolf. His voice was gentle now, almost tender. She is there, Seren. I can feel her. She's been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Waiting for me. His other hand came up to frame my face, both hands now holding me like I might shatter. This heat, I gasped. It's never happened before. I don't know what to do. I don't know. I know. His thumbs brushed away tears I hadn't realized were falling. Heat that comes with the mate bond forming is always more intense than normal. Thy body recognizes me as thy intended mate, and it is demanding completion of the bond, demanding that I claim thee, breed thee, fill thy womb with my seed until it takes root. I moaned at his words, my core clenching, while fresh wetness gushed out. The image he painted was so vivid I could see it, feel it, his hands on my hips, his weight pressing me down, his knot swelling inside me while he filled me. What do I do? My voice broke on the question. Please, tell me what to do. His eyes flashed brighter gold. First thou wilt call me by my name. I am Draven. And when I am buried inside thee, making thee scream, I will not hear thy formal address. Draven. I tested the name. It felt right. Please, Draven, I know what thou needest. His voice dropped to something dark and hungry. Thy heat demands relief, and thy wolf demands claiming. And I am more than willing to give thee both. He paused, drew back slightly, though his hand stayed on my face. But Saren, thou must understand something. Once I claim thee, once I knot thee, and fill thee with my seed, the bond will be permanent and unbreakable. Thou wilt be my mate, my queen, for the rest of our very long lives. If thou art not ready for that, if thou hast any doubt at all, speak now, and I will have my healers tend thy heat another way. I should have said no, should have asked for the healers, should have requested time to think. I'd been rejected 3 days ago, had nearly died in the snow, had woken up in a palace with no understanding of why I was here. This was too fast, too much, too overwhelming. But looking into his burning gold eyes, feeling the mate bond humming between us, sensing my wolf's absolute certainty, I had no doubt at all. I want thee, I whispered. I want this. I want to be thine. Something fierce and possessive flashed across his face. When he spoke, his voice had gone rough with barely restrained need. Then thou shalt have me, here and now before the goddess and my throne. His hand slid from my face down to my waist, gripping tight. Spread thy legs, Omega. I am going to breed thee where everyone can see the evidence of our union. He didn't wait for me to comply. Simply lifted me as though I weighed nothing at all, carrying me toward the obsidian throne with purposeful strides. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Anticipation and arousal and a hint of fear all mixed together into something that made my head spin. Draven sat on his throne with me in his lap, turned me so my back was against his chest, and spread my legs wide over the arms of the chair. The position left me completely exposed, my soaked undergarments on full display. Wetness still flowing from my core to pool on the black stone beneath us. Anyone who enters this hall after we are done will smell what happened here, Draven murmured against my ear, one hand sliding up my inner thigh. Will know that I claimed my mate on my throne, that I bred her where I rule. Does that shame thee, Saren? It should, I gasped as his fingers found the edge of my undergarments and began to pull them aside. It should shame me terribly. Then why dost thou grow wetter at the thought? His fingers slid through my slick folds, found my entrance, and circled it with maddening lightness. Because I'm broken, I moaned as one finger finally pushed inside. Because I'm wrong and shameful and thou art perfect. He worked that single finger deeper, and even that small intrusion felt overwhelming. My inner walls clenched around him. Absolutely perfect, and I am going to prove it to thee. He added a second finger, and I cried out at the stretch. My body had never been breached before, never accommodated anything larger than my own hesitant explorations. But there was no pain, only pleasure, only rightness, only the desperate need for more. His free hand came up to cut my breast through the silk gown, found my nipple already hard, and rolled it between thumb and forefinger until I was writhing in his lap. So responsive, he growled against my throat. So perfect and tight and made for this. He added a third finger, and I sobbed at the intensity. My body tried to pull away even as my hips rocked forward, seeking more. Draven, please, not yet. His fingers pumped in and out with steady rhythm, stretching me, preparing me. Not until I've made certain thou canst take my knot without tearing. The reminder that this was just preparation sent another wave of heat through me. More wetness flooded out around his fingers, making obscene sounds that echoed through the empty throne room. Please, I begged. Please, I can't. I know what thou needest. He withdrew his fingers, and I whimpered at the loss. Then I heard the sound of laces being undone, felt him shifting beneath me, freeing himself. And then something thick and blunt was pressing against my entrance. This is going to hurt at first. His voice was strained. Thy body has never taken a knot before, but I promise thee, little Omega, the pleasure will be worth the pain. He pushed forward, and I screamed. The invasion was overwhelming. Too much, too big, impossible to accommodate. My body stretched around him, inch by impossible, inch burning as it struggled to accept something it wasn't prepared for. But even through the burn, there was pleasure. The feeling of finally being filled. Of having the emptiness I'd carried my entire life suddenly complete. My wolf was howling in my head, chanting, yes, 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 ours mate, claim, breed ours. Draven pushed deeper with a growl that vibrated through his chest and into my back. One hand gripped my hip hard enough to bruise. The other slid down to find the swollen pearl between my legs, circling it with devastating precision. More, my wolf demanded, using my voice. Deeper, breed us, make us yours. And Draven gave us more. Pushed deeper with steady, relentless pressure until I was certain I couldn't take another inch. Until I was sure I would split apart from the size of him. And then he was fully seated, his hips flush against mine, both of us panting like we'd run miles. So perfect, he breathed against my throat. So tight and hot and perfect. Thou art made for my knot, Saren. Made to take me. Made to milk my seed. Made to breed. He began to move. Slow withdrawals that dragged against every nerve ending. Deep thrusts that punched the air from my lungs and sent sparks of pleasure racing up my spine. Each stroke built the pressure coiling in my lower belly higher, tighter, until I thought I would die from the intensity of it. The sound of flesh meeting flesh echoed through the massive hall. My desperate cries, his guttural groans, the wet slide of him moving in and out of my body. Faster, I heard myself beg. Please, Draven, harder. I need... His control snapped. He gave me exactly what I begged for. His hips pistoning up into me with bruising force while his hand worked my pearl with devastating skill. The other hand slid up to my throat, not squeezing, but holding, claiming. Come for me, he commanded. Come on thy alpha's knot, and show me thou art mine. The combination of his length pounding into me, his fingers working magic, and the sheer dominance in his voice pushed me over the edge. I came with a scream that echoed off stone walls. My body clamped down on him with rippling pulses that went on and on. Wave after wave of pleasure so intense, it bordered on pain. Draven roared his own release. His knot swelled inside me, stretching me impossibly wider, locking us together as he filled me with pulse after pulse of hot seed. The feeling of his knot sent me into a second orgasm before the first had fully faded. I sobbed his name as my body milked him, taking everything he had to give. We stayed locked together on the throne, both trembling, both gasping for breath, his seed still pulsing into me while his knot kept us joined. It would be 30 minutes at least before it went down. Maybe longer. I found I didn't mind being trapped here, impaled on my mate's length in the seat of his power, his seed flooding my womb. This was right. This was where I belonged, not rejected and dying in the snow, but claimed and cherished on a king's throne. Thou art mine now, Draven murmured against my ear, his hands gentle now, stroking my sweat-dampened skin. My mate, my queen, my everything, and I am never letting thee go. I wanted to respond, wanted to tell him I was his, that I'd never felt so complete, but exhaustion was pulling at me with irresistible force. The intensity of my first heat, my first mating, draining what little strength I had left. I let my eyes drift closed, safe in my mate's arms, his knot still locked deep inside me, his seed still filling my womb. This is right, I thought hazily as sleep claimed me. This is home. I woke to warmth and the scent of pine. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The bed beneath me was too soft, the furs too heavy, the room too large. Then memory crashed back and awareness flooded my cheeks. The throne room, the claiming, Draven's knot locked inside me while the entire court had been just beyond those doors. I was in the Alpha King's bed. I sat up slowly, wincing at the soreness between my legs. My inner thighs bore the evidence of what we'd done, dried remnants of our joining that I couldn't hide. The chamber was massive, stone walls hung with tapestries depicting ancient battles, a fireplace large enough to stand in, windows of leaded glass that looked out over snow-capped mountains turned gold by the rising sun. And seated in a chair beside the bed, watching me with those burning gold eyes, was Draven. He'd changed from the formal black leather into soft gray wool. His dark hair was loose around his shoulders. In the morning light, he looked younger, almost human if not for those eyes. How long did I sleep? My voice came out rough. Several hours. He poured water from a clay pitcher and brought it to me. Thy heat exhausted thee. I drank gratefully, then noticed the other changes. Someone had bathed me while I slept, dressed me in a silk nightgown the color of moonlight. My hair had been combed. Vesper tended thee, Draven said, reading my confusion. I would not allow anyone else to touch thee while thou wert vulnerable. The possessiveness in his voice made something warm unfurl in my chest. How dost thou feel? I considered the question. Sore, yes. Overwhelmed, definitely. But also alive, I said finally. For the first time in 6 years, I feel alive. My wolf stirred in agreement. Still there, still awake. Yesterday thou wast a rejected Omega with no prospects, Draven said quietly. Today thou art the mate of a king and future queen of the Northern Territories. That is quite the change. Reality crashed down on me. Queen, he expected me to be queen, to rule beside him, to make decisions that affected thousands of wolves. I didn't know how to be a queen. I could barely read. Had no education beyond what I'd taught myself from stolen books. I don't know how to be a queen, I whispered, old fears rising. I have no training, no education in matters of state. I can barely control my own wolf, let alone help rule a kingdom. Draven stood and crossed to the bed, sat beside me, and took my hands in his. Then it is fortunate thou hast centuries to learn. His thumbs traced circles on my palms. Saren, I am not expecting thee to become the perfect queen overnight. What I need from thee right now is simply thy presence, thy truth, thy willingness to try. The rest will come. But the court, the nobles, they will say I am not good enough. Let them say what they will. Steel entered his voice. Thou art my true mate, chosen by the goddess herself. Anyone who questions thy worth questions her wisdom, and I will not tolerate such blasphemy in my kingdom. I wanted to believe him, wanted to let go of the lifetime of being told I was worthless, but those wounds ran deep. What if my wolf never fully emerges? What if I am still broken, despite the bond? Thy wolf is there, Seren. I felt her during our mating. He raised one of my hands to his lips. She is young still, newly awakened, but she is fierce and protective of what is hers, as am I. The conviction in his voice made my chest ache. I am afraid, I admitted, afraid that I will wake up and this will all have been a dream, afraid that I will fail thee. He silenced me with a kiss, slow and deep and full of promise. When he pulled back, his golden eyes were blazing. Thou couldst never fail me. The goddess chose thee for a reason. Trust in that even when thou canst not yet trust in thyself. What happens now, I asked when I trusted my voice. Now we rest and recover from thy heat. He settled back and pulled me close. Then tomorrow we begin presenting thee to the court as my chosen mate and future queen. There will be ceremonies, oaths, a formal mating rite before the assembled nobles. My stomach clenched. More public exposure, more chances to fail. It will be overwhelming, Draven continued, but I will be beside thee every step. He paused, then smiled a real smile that transformed his harsh features. And after all that we ruled together, we make decisions about the kingdom. We handle disputes and petitions. We work to make our territories safer for all our people. His hand slid down to rest on my lower belly, and in between all that responsibility, we steal moments alone where I can remind thee exactly who thou belongest to. Heat flared in his eyes. Thy heat will not fully pass for 3 days. During that time, thy body will demand my knot repeatedly. This is normal for mate bond heat. Thy body is trying to ensure conception. The thought of carrying his child sent a bolt of heat through my core. I'd never thought about having pups before. Had assumed my broken state meant I would never bear young. But now the image was seared into my mind. My belly swelling. A pup with Draven's dark hair and my silver eyes. I wanted it desperately. Please, I whispered as fresh wetness began to gather. Please, I know what thou needest. He positioned himself between my legs. When he pushed inside in one smooth stroke, I cried out at the feeling of being filled again. Still sore, still overwhelmed, but also right, complete. Home. This time he moved with less urgency, taking his time to build my pleasure slowly, thoroughly, until I was writhing beneath him and begging for release. When I finally came, it was with a long cry that seemed to come from my very soul. And when Draven followed me over the edge, I felt something shift deep inside my chest. My wolf blazed to life with a clarity that took my breath away. Mine, she growled with fierce possessiveness. Our mate, our alpha, our king. Yes, I agreed, silently wrapping my arms around Draven as his knot locked us together. Ours. The 3 days of heat passed in a blur of pleasure and claiming and long conversations in between joinings. Draven told me about his kingdom, about the northern territories that stretched from the Canadian border down through Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, about the pacts that owed him allegiance and the constant political maneuvering required to keep peace. He told me about ruling alone for 2 centuries, about waiting for his true mate, about slowly losing hope. And then 3 days ago, he'd felt something shift in the world, had known with absolute certainty that his mate had finally appeared, had sent his best trackers out immediately following the pull of the bond until they found me half frozen in Frostpine Pass. I knew the moment thy betrothed rejected thee, Draven said on the 3rd night, both of us tangled together in his massive bed. Felt thy pain like a knife to my own chest. Felt the bond trying to form even though we had never met. His fingers traced idle patterns on my bare shoulder. I sent 20 wolves to search the territories. And when the guard captain carried thee into the citadel, unconscious and near death, his hand tightened. I felt the bond snap into place with such force it nearly brought me to my knees. Why did my wolf wait? I asked. Why not emerge when I turned 16? Because she was protecting thee. Draven pressed a kiss to my temple. Had thy wolf emerged at 16, some other alpha might have claimed thee, might have forced a bond that was not meant to be. The goddess kept her hidden until the right moment, until I could find thee. My wolf hummed in agreement. Yes, protected, waited, saved for mate. By the time my heat finally broke on the morning of the fourth day, I felt like a different person. My wolf was fully awake now, strong and fierce and absolutely devoted to our mate, and I had begun to believe just a little that perhaps I really could be what Draven needed. On the fourth day, he brought me before the assembled court. I wore a gown of deepest blue that brought out the silver in my eyes. A crown of woven silver sat on my short hair, still ragged, but Vesper had done her best. I stood beside Draven's throne while he formally announced our mate bond and his intention to make me his queen. The court erupted in shock and speculation, but no one dared question the Alpha King's choice to his face. There were whispers, though. I heard them as I walked through the palace corridors over the following days. Saw the sidelong looks and barely concealed sneers. She is nobody, one lady whispered as I passed. No pack, no family of note, no wolf until the bond formed. What could His Majesty possibly see in such a creature? Perhaps she bewitched him, another suggested. Used some dark magic to ensnare his mind. I tried to ignore them, tried to hold my head high as Draven had taught me, but the words still cut deep, still made me question whether I truly belonged. It wasn't until a week after our mating that I discovered exactly how dangerous the noble's whispers could be. I was walking through the palace gardens, seeking a moment of peace when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Lord Thorn Vargrath was speaking with several other nobles. His voice carried across the hedges, low and dangerous. The king has lost his mind, Thorn was saying, mating with a broken Omega who has no wolf, no bloodline, no value whatsoever. It is an embarrassment to the crown. Perhaps we should petition him to set her aside, one of the others suggested, before she produces a weak offspring that will taint the royal line. Or perhaps, Thorn's voice dropped lower, we should take more direct action. Accidents happen after all. If the Omega were to meet with some unfortunate misfortune, the king would be free to choose a proper mate. Ice flooded my veins. They were talking about killing me. About murdering the king's mate to force him to choose someone they deemed more appropriate. I should have run immediately to tell Draven, should have reported their treasonous plotting. But fear held me frozen. Old insecurities rising up to whisper that perhaps they were right, that perhaps Draven would be better off with someone else. Perhaps it would be better if I simply left. I fled back to my chambers before anyone could see me, my heart pounding and tears streaming down my face. This was exactly what I'd feared, that my presence would cause problems for Draven, that my lack of worth would undermine his rule. Perhaps leaving really was the best option. I was packing a small bag when Draven walked in. He took one look at my tear-stained face and the half-packed belongings, and his expression went dark. Alpha power pressed down so heavily I could barely breathe. "What has happened?" he demanded. "Who has hurt thee?" "No one," I lied, unable to meet his eyes. I think perhaps I should go. This was a mistake. I am causing thee problems with thy court and Siren." The command in his voice made me look up. What I saw in his eyes made my breath catch. Raw fury mixed with something that looked like pain. "Tell me who has threatened thee. Tell me who has made thee believe thou art not wanted here." I broke then, the whole story spilling out between sobs. The whispers I'd endured, the looks from nobles, and finally the conversation in the garden where Lord Thorn had suggested I meet with an unfortunate accident. By the time I finished, Draven was shaking with barely controlled rage. His alpha power pressing down so heavily I had to fight to stay on my feet. His eyes had gone pure molten gold with no trace of pupil remaining. "Where is Lord Thorn now?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. I don't know." "Find him." The command wasn't directed at me. Guards appeared in the doorway as though summoned. "Find Lord Thorn Vargrath and bring him to the throne room immediately, along with anyone else who was party to his plotting, and summon the entire court. They are about to learn what happens when someone threatens my mate." Within the hour, the throne room was packed with nervous nobles. Lord Thorn and 3 other conspirators knelt in chains before the obsidian throne. I stood beside Draven, my hand clasped firmly in his, while he addressed the assembled court with ice in his voice. "It has come to my attention that some among ye believe my mate is unworthy of her position, that her lack of traditional bloodline makes her inferior, that she should be set aside or even eliminated so that I might choose a more suitable queen." The conspirators had gone pale. The rest of the court looked shocked and frightened. "Let me make something absolutely clear." Draven's voice carried to every corner. "Siren is my true mate, chosen by the goddess herself. Anyone who questions her worth questions divine will. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. And anyone who harms even one hair on her head will discover exactly why I have ruled unchallenged for 200 years. He stood then, and his alpha power rolled through the room like a physical force. Several nobles actually stumbled. Lord Thorn Vargrath and his co-conspirators will be executed at dawn for treason and attempted regicide. Their lands and titles will be stripped, their families exiled from the northern territories, and let this be a lesson to all of ye. His eyes swept the assembled court. Seren is your queen, and she will be treated with the respect and reverence that position demands. Is that understood? The assembled court dropped to their knees as one. Voices raised in hasty agreement and pledges of loyalty, but I barely heard them. All I could focus on was the way Draven's hand tightened on mine, the way he looked at me with such absolute conviction that I was precious and valuable and worthy. After the court was dismissed and the conspirators dragged away, Draven pulled me into his arms. I am sorry, he murmured against my hair. Sorry that thou hast had to endure such treatment. Sorry that I did not make thy value clear enough from the beginning. He pulled back to look into my eyes. Thou art everything to me, Seren. My mate, my queen, my heart. And I will spend the rest of our very long lives proving it to thee and anyone foolish enough to question it. I buried my face in his chest and let myself cry, releasing all the fear and doubt and pain I'd been carrying. Draven held me through it all, steady and solid. I am trying to believe I belong here, I whispered when my tears finally subsided. But it is so hard when I have spent my entire life being told otherwise. Then let me show thee a different truth. Draven cupped my face in his hands. Let me show thee the Omega so brave she walked out into a blizzard rather than burden her pack. So strong she survived rejection and exile and near death without losing her essential kindness. His thumbs brushed away the last of my tears. That Omega is not broken or worthless or unworthy. She is extraordinary, and I am the most fortunate alpha in existence because the goddess chose to give her to me. Something cracked open in my chest, some last wall of resistance crumbling. Perhaps I couldn't see my own worth yet, but I could see it reflected in his eyes, could trust in his certainty. I love thee, I whispered. I know I am supposed to wait until the formal mating ceremony to say such things, but I cannot hold it in. I love thee, Draven, and I am trying so hard to be worthy of thy love in return. Thou already art, his own eyes bright with emotion, worthy and precious and mine, as I am thine now and always. When he kissed me, I felt my wolf rise up with fierce joy, finally fully awake and absolutely certain that we were exactly where we belonged. 2 weeks later, a messenger arrived from the Southern Territories. I received him in the throne room, trying to project the commanding presence Draven always displayed. The messenger bowed low. Your Majesty, I bring word from Lord Corwin of House Bracken. He requests permission to enter Shadow Peak territory to speak with thee on a matter of great importance. My blood ran cold. Corwin, my former betrothed. What matter could possibly require his presence here? The messenger shifted uncomfortably. He did not say what the matter concerned, Your Majesty, only that it involves thy former betrothal and his great regret at how matters were handled. Every instinct told me to refuse, but I was queen now, and queens did not let personal feelings dictate political decisions. Grant him permission to enter, I said, but he is to be escorted at all times and will have audience with me in the formal throne room with witnesses present. I will not meet him privately. As Your Majesty commands. I immediately sent word to Draven about Corwin's impending arrival. Though I knew the message wouldn't reach him in time, he was 3 days away on the eastern border. I would have to face my former betrothed alone. Corwin arrived the following morning. I barely recognized him. The confident alpha who had rejected me now looked haggard and worn. His face was lined with exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He dropped to his knees before the throne without being commanded. Your Majesty, he began, his voice rough. I thank thee for granting me this audience. I do not deserve thy mercy. Speak thy purpose, I said. Why hast thou come all this way? I have come to beg thy forgiveness. There was genuine anguish in his voice. And to warn thee of danger. My wolf went on immediate alert. There are those in the Southern Territories who believe the Alpha King has been weakened by taking an unworthy mate. Corwin continued. They plot to test his strength, to launch attacks that will force him to prove he has not lost his edge. And if they find him vulnerable, they will strike at the heart of his power. At thee. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression carefully neutral. And why shouldst thou warn me of this? Why not join those who share thy belief that I am unworthy? Finally, Corwin looked up. What I saw there shocked me. Genuine shame. Deep regret. Self-loathing. Because I was wrong, he said, his voice breaking. Goddess help me, I was so wrong about thee, Seren. I rejected thee because I thought thou wast weak. Because I believed a wolf without power had no value. But I have watched thee these past weeks, heard the reports of thy wisdom and courage. Thou art 10 times the leader I could ever hope to be, and I threw that away for meaningless political advantage. I studied him carefully, found only genuine remorse. Thy warning is noted, I said coolly, but that does not explain why thou hast truly come. Surely a message would have sufficed. I needed to see thee. Corwin's hands clenched. Needed to look thee in the eye and tell thee how deeply I regret my actions. Thou deserves so much better than what I gave thee. And I have spent every day since thy departure cursing my own stupidity. Before I could respond, the throne room doors burst open with such force they slammed against the stone walls. Draven strode in with murder in his eyes. His alpha power pressed down so heavily that Corwin immediately dropped flat to the floor whimpering. Even I felt the crushing weight of it. Draven, I called out, keeping my voice calm. Thou art early. What happened? I received thy message and returned immediately. His eyes never left Corwin's prone form. No one threatens my mate and lives to speak of it. He did not threaten me, I said quickly. He came to warn me of others who plot against us. Draven, please, hear what he has to say. Draven's jaw clenched, but he reined in his power enough that Corwin could lift his head. Speak, he commanded, and choose thy words carefully, for they may be thy last. Corwin explained everything he knew, named the conspirators in the southern territories, detailed their plans to attack border settlements, described how they intended to use the chaos to strike at me directly. The more he spoke, the darker Draven's expression became. When Corwin finally fell silent, Draven turned to his guards. Take him to secure chambers, post guards at the door. He is not to leave until I have verified his information. But do not harm him. His eyes flicked back to Corwin. If what he says proves true, he has earned clemency for his warning. After Corwin was led away, Draven pulled me into his arms with desperate intensity. When I received thy message, that he was here, that the alpha who rejected thee sought audience, I nearly went mad, he murmured against my hair. I thought perhaps he had come to try to reclaim thee. I pulled back to look into his eyes, saw vulnerability there. Actual fear, awe, thou thought I might choose him over thee. I know thou art mine. His arms tightened, but the thought of losing thee of some other alpha trying to take what is mine, it makes me irrational. Well, then let me prove I am thine, I whispered. What followed was different from our first claiming. There was desperation instead of ceremony, jealousy and possession instead of divine inevitability. When his knot locked inside me on that same throne, I whispered the truth he needed to hear. No other alpha exists for me, only thee, now and forever. And when we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I knew with absolute certainty that no matter what challenges came, I would face them all with my mate beside me. I was no longer the broken Omega who had been left to die in the snow. I was Seren Nightshade, mate to the Alpha King, future queen of the Northern Territories, and I was finally beginning to believe I deserved it. The information Corwin provided proved accurate. Within 2 days, Draven's scouts confirmed everything conspirators gathering in the Southern Territories, weapons stockpiles being moved under cover of darkness, attack plans targeting our weakest border settlements. But the investigation revealed something far more disturbing. This conspiracy ran deeper than anyone had suspected. I was in the war room when Commander Rowan brought the evidence. A leather satchel filled with documents he'd seized from Lord Thorne's chambers before the execution. Letters written in code. Ledgers showing movement of gold. Maps marking strategic points across 5 territories. Draven spread the documents across the massive oak table, his expression growing darker with each page. This was not Thorne's plan, he said finally. These letters referenced someone else, someone who gave the orders, someone Thorne called the architect. My wolf stirred uneasily. We had executed the conspirators, had thought the threat ended with Thorne's death, but we had only cut off a limb. The head of this serpent still lived. Can the code be broken? I asked, studying the cramped handwriting. Vesper is working on it. Rowan's face was grim. She has experience with old ciphers, but even without breaking the code, the pattern is clear. Thorne received orders. He did not give them. I picked up one of the ledgers, ran my finger down columns of numbers meticulously recorded over months, years even. 50,000 gold pieces moved in the spring, 75,000 in summer, 100,000 last autumn. This is not the work of a small conspiracy, I said slowly. This is systematic, organized. Someone has been moving gold and weapons and wolves for years, building towards something. Draven's hand covered mine on the ledger, building toward removing me from power. He met my eyes. And now that I have a mate, now that there is someone they perceive as a weakness, they are accelerating their timeline. The words should have frightened me. Instead, I felt my wolf rise up with fierce determination. Let them try, then we find the architect, I said. We expose them, and we end this conspiracy permanently. Pride flickered in Draven's golden eyes. My fierce queen, yes, that is exactly what we shall do. But before Vesper could fully break the code, the answer came from an unexpected source. 3 days later, I was walking through the Citadel gardens when one of the guards approached. Your Majesty, there is someone at the eastern gate requesting to see thee. She says it is urgent, says she has information about the conspiracy. My heart jumped. Who is Ashipoi? She gave her name as Elowen Ashmore. The world tilted. Elowen, my sister. The one who had stood silent while Corwin rejected me, who had watched me walk out into the wilderness without saying a word. What was she doing here? Bring her to the small receiving room, I said, and send word to His Majesty that I may need him. 20 minutes later, I stood in the receiving room, watching my sister enter. She looked thinner than I remembered. Her dark hair hung in lank strands around a face marked by exhaustion and shame. She dropped to her knees the moment she saw me. Seren, Your Majesty, Her voice broke. I am so sorry for everything, for my silence, for my cowardice, for not protecting thee when I should have. I studied her, found only genuine remorse. Rise, I said quietly, and tell me why thou art here. Elowen stood on shaking legs, met my eyes, and I saw tears streaming down her face. I came to help, and to tell thee the truth about what happened. She drew a shuddering breath. Mother did not simply fail to protect thee from Corwin's rejection. She arranged it. She sold thee to him, Seren, for 5,000 gold pieces. The words hit like a physical blow. Sold me. My own mother had sold me. Corwin's family did not have 5,000 gold, I said slowly. Where did the gold come from? That is what I came to tell thee. Elowen pulled a folded document from her cloak. I found this hidden in Mother's chamber after thou left. I did not understand what it meant at first, but after I heard rumors of the conspiracy, she held out the document with trembling hands. I took it, unfolded it, read the cramped handwriting that promised payment to Meredith Ashmore in exchange for ensuring her daughter's rejection and exile. The signature at the bottom made my blood run cold. Morgath Silverthorn. Who is Morgath Silverthorn? I asked, though my wolf was already growling the answer. Dangerous. Threat. Enemy. The king's former senior advisor, Elowen said. She served him for 80 years, was removed from her position 5 years ago for reasons that were never made public. She has been living in the Southern Territory since then. Draven's voice came from the doorway, cold as winter ice. The reasons were made private because I did not wish to humiliate her publicly. He entered, and I could see his wolf riding close to the surface. Lady Morgath believed herself entitled to be my queen. When I refused her advances, she attempted to poison my food. I exiled her rather than execute her in recognition of her years of service. He crossed to me, took the document from my hands, and read it with growing fury. And now she has orchestrated a conspiracy to remove me and install a puppet king she can control. His hands crumpled the paper, using my mate, using thee as the lever to force my hand. Commander Rowan entered behind him carrying something wrapped in cloth. Your Majesty, we found this in Thorn's effects as well. He unwrapped the cloth to reveal a wolf collar marked with silver runes, iron forged, designed to suppress an alpha's power. Draven's face went white. I've been wearing this for 6 months. A gift from Lady Morgath, Rowan finished grimly. She gave it to you before her exile, claiming it was a token of loyalty. She's been poisoning you slowly, weakening you so her assassins would have a chance. My wolf snarled. Remove it, now! When Draven tore the collar off, his power flooded back like a dam breaking. The sheer force of it made the windows rattle, and I realized Morgath had been planning this for years. Decades. I looked at my sister, saw the shame and regret warring in her expression. Why did thou not come to me sooner? Because I was a coward. Fresh tears spilled down Elowen's cheeks. Because I was ashamed. Because I did not know if thou wouldst believe me. But when I heard whispers of another plot and attack planned for the winter solstice ceremony, I knew I had to warn thee, even if it meant facing thy justified anger. Winter solstice, the formal mating ceremony. We were to be formally bonded before the assembled nobles in just 2 weeks, the perfect opportunity for Morgath to strike. What dost thou know of this attack? Draven demanded. Only fragments, whispers from wolves passing through Ironwood territory. Elwyn twisted her hands together. They spoke of waiting for the ceremony, of iron weapons, of removing the broken Omega before she could produce weak heirs. Iron weapons, the one thing that could seriously harm Draven. I felt cold fear flood through me, not for myself, but for him. We cancel the ceremony, I said immediately. Move it to a private venue. No. Draven's hand found mine. We do not hide. We do not let her dictate our actions through fear. We proceed with the ceremony as planned. But we proceed, he repeated. But we set a trap. We let Morgath believe her plan will succeed. And when she strikes, we will be ready. He turned to Rowan. Send word to the Alliance. Tell them we require their presence at the winter solstice ceremony. Tell them we have evidence of a conspiracy that threatens the stability of the entire Northern Territories. The Alliance. The inter-territorial governing body that held authority over all regional kings. They could convene tribunals, pass judgments, enforce consequences. If we could expose Morgath before the Alliance, her conspiracy would end permanently. And thee, Draven said, turning back to Elwyn, thou wilt testify to what thou knowest. In exchange, I grant thee clemency for thy prior silence, and a position in my household if thou desirest it. Thy sister will need allies in the coming days. Elwyn dropped to her knees again, this time with her hand over her heart. I will serve thee both until my dying breath, your majesties. This I swear, by. After Elwyn was escorted to guest chambers, I stood with Draven in the war room, staring at maps marked with troop positions. She will strike during the ceremony, I said quietly, when thy attention is on me, when the crowd is largest. I know. Draven's arm came around my waist. That is why we will be prepared. Rowan's guards will be positioned throughout the hall, plain-clothed warriors among the nobles. Every entrance watched. And if she succeeds anyway, if the iron weapons, then thou wilt save me. I looked up at him, startled. Thy wolf is strong, Seren, stronger than thou knowest. And the mate bond means thou canst sense danger to me before it strikes. His hand cupped my face. I trust thee to protect me as I protect thee. We are partners in this. Equals. Equals. The word he'd used from the beginning. I will not let her take thee from me, I whispered. I will burn the whole world before I let that happen. I know. He pressed his forehead to mine. My fierce, perfect queen. I know. The days before the winter solstice passed in a blur of preparation. Draven drilled his guards until they could respond to threats in their sleep. Rowan coordinated with the Alliance representatives who arrived in pairs and trios, and I trained with Vesper. Not in politics or diplomacy, though, we worked on those too, but in shifting, in controlling my newly awakened wolf, in using the strength the goddess had finally granted me. My wolf was young still, newly emerged, but she was fierce and fast and absolutely devoted to protecting our mate. By the time the winter solstice arrived, I could shift in seconds instead of minutes, could hold my wolf form for hours without exhaustion. I prayed it would not be necessary, but I was ready if it was. The ceremony began at sunset. The great hall had been transformed. Hundreds of candles cast dancing light across stone walls hung with evergreen boughs and winter roses. 500 witnesses filled the space. Nobles from every territory, Alliance representatives in their formal robes, guards, positioned at careful intervals. I wore white silk embroidered with silver thread. A crown of twisted silver sat on my head. Vesper had woven small white flowers through my short hair, until it looked almost elegant. Draven stood beside me in black leather, chased with